The chickenpox experience for us was initially something we thought was going to pan out to be pretty normal. Our eldest daughter, Indiana, contracted it late in 2010, just after Christmas, and she presented with the classic symptoms, just a flu-like symptoms, and then the spots on her trunk and her back, and it was somewhat of a relief when she got it. We sort of felt as parents, oh yay, we get to tick that box. When our second child, Boston, presented with the symptoms of a cold and flu, we knew straight away, oh yes, it's now Boston's turn to go through it, and it was pretty ordinary. He got his spots and there was nothing too different with what Indy went through, so we just dealt with it with the normal PAMO, and there was a couple of spots on his back which started off just being standard blisters but then turned into these black scabs. One of them, the first one, being that it was the first one, it ended up getting bigger, and it was the biggest that he got. At the full size, it was around about the size of a 50-cent coin. We took him to the doctor and they said that it was just a classic case of chickenpox, and that the scab on his back was just through him scratching. When another spot turned the same way, and we knew that through his behaviour he was barely moving, let alone itching, we knew that it wasn't a spot that had changed like that because of a scratch. It was something else. So we took him back to the doctor, and they suspected it could have been meningitis. So he was, we rushed into the emergency department, where they told us that naturally they weren't keen for chickenpox to be in the hospital because it's incredibly contagious. So, and that it wasn't actually meningitis. They didn't think it was just a severe case of chickenpox. So we insisted when we went back to the hospital for the second time that he be examined and have some bloods taken, and at that point we were put into an isolation room, which was it was a bit of a shock. They completely gowned up from head to toe, and it was a bit of a horrible feeling being locked away in a wee room with a boy who was so incredibly ill, and having the staff come in completely gowned up. His bloods were tested and it came back that he had a Staph aureus infection, and so straight away they gave him antibiotics to treat accordingly, and the particular antibiotic that was given was a pretty hardcore one, and it was not able to be taken orally. It just tasted putrid. There's not a chance. We tried to disguise it in chocolate and Coke even, and he just, not a chance. You could just taste it no matter what. So they put it through an IV, but unfortunately, being that it was such a hardcore antibiotic, it just almost ate through his veins. He had 8 different cannula sites, and each time they had to numb the area and insert the cannula, and he had that done 8 times, his wrists, his feet. So that was pretty tough. That was probably one of the most painful things he had to get done each time. Along with having the antibiotics and the fluids put in through the drip, he was given daily dressing changes, and the skin around the outside of the scab, it got pretty damaged with the dressings being torn off all the time, and he didn't like that very much. He could see the nurse coming through the door and he knew what was going to happen, and so he'd run up to the top of the bed and try and, crawl up to the top of the bed and try and get away from her, but yeah, it just had to be done. They had to be flushed out. It was a long stint in hospital. He really did handle it so well for a 2.5-year-old. I had our third child in Alaska. She was 3 months at the time, and she was exclusively breastfed, so she had to be with me through the whole experience. And we sat in that ward, and I was just waiting for her to come down with it as well. And that was a horrible feeling, seeing what Boston was going through and thinking, oh no, what if Alaska gets this? But luckily she didn't get it. Mike had to take a lot of time off work. It was a very expensive experience for us, the parking meters, and a lot of takeout foods. Indy who was 4.5, she had to be taken to and from kindy each day. People had to stay over at our house to look after her. It just really did disrupt the whole family routine, and it was exhausting to see him like that and to also race around to get everyone else sorted. It was a very exhausting few weeks. When Boston's antibiotics took hold and his cell levels were improving, we really wanted to get him up and get him out down to the playroom in the paediatric ward, and I found this to be one of the hardest parts of it. He couldn't walk. We put him down on the ground and his legs just collapsed under him. He had just been in bed for, it was only 10, 11 days, but it had just taken it out of him, and even the muscle tone on his legs, he didn't have it anymore. When we were discharged from hospital, Boston went through a further 7 to 10 weeks of having a district nurse come around to the house every day and change the dressings. So he was kept at home for a good 3 months. He didn't go to kindy, and he hated that, and it was not a happy time being stuck at home. He got over it, and we had, once everything was sort of as healed as it could be, we had an appointment with a plastic surgeon, because I sort of felt it's something, he's now scarred permanently from what seemed to be boring old chickenpox. He's got these three big scars on his back, and we thought that maybe we could get something done, a graft or something. We were hoping some cream that could just, take the scars away, but he's left with them for the rest of his life now. And every time he jumps in the shower at night and I look at his back, it just brings back the experience. And it's literally a feeling of guilt. I feel as soon as I look at his back, I should have known. I should have known there was an injection I could have given the kids to stop them from getting chickenpox. I should have taken him to the doctor sooner. Just the what ifs. We wanted to tell our story so that New Zealand families know that sometimes chickenpox, it isn't just as straightforward. It's not just a standard disease that you get. It can be a hell of a lot worse. And for Boston, being 2.5, having to go through what he did, us as a family having to go through what we did, all for the sake of a vaccine that could have stopped it all, could have reduced his severity of the disease or completely avoided it for him. So in hindsight, yeah, we wish we had known more. We wish we had been told more.